Ireland, the Irish, and African slavery, complicity and memory. When we think of the Atlantic slave trade, we often think of Britain, Portugal, Spain, France, the Dutch, and of course, Africa and the Americas. But what about Ireland and the Irish? How did Irish people and Ireland's economy and empire connections figure in the story of African slavery? In this video, we'll explore 3 interlinked strands. 1. Irish-involved persons in the African trade. 2. Irish settlers, planters in the Caribbean and their role with enslaved Africans. And 3. How the history is often misunderstood or misrepresented today. First, involvement in the African side of the triangular trade. While Ireland did not have the large port infrastructure of, say, Liverpool or Nantes, Irish merchants and individuals nevertheless participated. For example, records show that in 1687 to 97, an Irishman named William Ronan worked for the Royal African Company at Cape Coast Castle on the Gold Coast, modern Ghana, as chairman of the Committee of Merchants. Similarly, an Irishman from Tralee, David Tuhoy, captained at least 4 slave voyages before 1772, sailing from Liverpool to the African coast and then to plantations in the Caribbean. These examples show that the Irish were not simply passive bystanders, some were active participants in the trade of enslaved Africans, investment in the shipping and merchant networks, and ownership of slave ships. Irish planters, settlers, and the plantation economy. Irish settlers and planters in the Caribbean and Americas, Irish migrants, both forced and voluntary, went to places like Montserrat, Barbados, Jamaica, and Antigua. Some arrived as indentured servants, but others became landowners and planters. In the colony of Montserrat, for example, Irish people filled every level of social strata, from indentured servant up to governor, and many became plantation owners. In those plantations, enslaved Africans formed the backbone of the labour system. Irish planters took part in that system. Indeed, evidence shows that Irish landowners were often enthusiastic exploiters of the African slave trade and benefited financially from it. The role of Irish individuals in diaspora in the plantation/slave economy is substantial, though often less well known than that of larger colonial powers. Irish indentured labour versus African chattel slavery. It's important to draw a clear distinction between the system of indentured servitude of Irish or other Europeans and the hereditary chattel slavery of Africans. Many stories circulate of Irish slaves in the Caribbean. However, historians stress that while many Irish did endure harsh conditions, they were legally servants for a fixed term, often had some legal rights, and were not treated as property for life in the way Africans were. As a history, Ireland article puts it, the legal distinctions between slavery, as reserved for Negroes, and servitude, as reserved for Europeans, were clearly spelled out in laws from the 1660s. Therefore, while Irish people suffered under colonial labour systems and some were forcibly transported, the term chattel slavery, applied to African-descended people, is not interchangeable with Indian or Irish indentured or transported labour. Irish abolitionism and anti-slavery links. Irish individuals and movements in the abolitionist cause. Ireland has a significant history of anti-slavery activism. For example, in 1845, the African-American abolitionist Frederick Douglass visited Ireland and was welcomed by Irish abolitionists, and his tour had strong resonance among Irish audiences. Moreover, while some Irish benefited from slave-based systems, other Irish voices opposed them. As One Piece puts it, the Irish were on both sides of the slavery issue. Thus, the Irish role was complex, both complicit in slavery-linked systems and active in abolitionist work. Legacy, memory, and myth-making. One prominent myth is the Irish slaves narrative that claims times, hundreds of thousands of Irish were sold into slavery in the same way Africans were. In fact, this has been widely debunked by historians. For instance, the Irish Times noted that conflating African perpetual slavery with Irish indentured servitude is inaccurate and misleading, and many Irish people participated in and profited from slavery. Also, institutions such as Trinity College Dublin have started to research their own historical links to slavery and colonialism, acknowledging Irish complicity in empire. This means understanding Irish history of slavery involves both recognizing complicity and resisting oversimplified or distorted narratives. Why it matters and what we learn. Why does this matter? First, because it expands our global understanding of slavery. Ireland and the Irish were part of the network of empire, trade and labour coercion, not merely victims of colonisation but actors. Second, because recognising the difference between types of unfree labour is vital. Indentured servitude, transported labour and chattel slavery each had very different legal, social and economic implications. Third, because how history is remembered affects modern identity. When Irish history is simplified into the Irish slaves narrative, it risks minimizing the unique experience of African chattel slavery and letting Irish-owned slavery escape scrutiny. Finally, it invites reflection. How do we understand and responsibly remember our past when they involve both victimhood and perpetration? Conclusion and call to action. Irish merchants and ship owners did participate in the African slave trade. Irish settlers and planters in the Caribbean played a role in the system of enslaved African labour. Many Irish endured indentured labour themselves, but that system is distinct from hereditary race-based chattel slavery of Africans. Ireland also contributed to abolitionist work, but must reckon with its own role. If you found this enlightening, please like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Leave a comment, what surprised you the most, let us know. And if you'd like a follow-up video on Irish plantations in the Caribbean or Irish merchants in West Africa, let me know. Once again, thank you for watching.